If you hear thunder in the background, yeah, we have a lot of thunder and rain here, so time to record another video. This is the second part of Jefferson. We talked about his biography last time. I'm going to talk about his ideology, his thinking, his theories this time. There is so much to cover with Jefferson. I'm editing heavily. You just don't know where to start. He's a very complicated guy. But the easiest way, I think, to do this is to talk about what he ordered written on his own tombstone. He is buried on his farm in Virginia at Monticello in Western Virginia, and he wanted three things written other than his name. He had writer of the Declaration of Independence, author of the Virginia Statutes of Religious Freedom, and founder of the University of Virginia. And that's a good shorthand thumbnail for Thomas Jefferson. The three issues that he fought for all his life: democracy, Declaration of Independence; Virginia Statutes of Religious Freedom. He is the big promoter of freedom of religion and separation of church and state; and founder of the University of Virginia, education, education, education. His goals: freedom from church and state. How do you do this? You educate the public and you give them land. People who own land and who are educated will never fall to an aristocracy or any kind of dictatorship. What didn't he put on his tombstone? President, Secretary of State, Governor of Virginia, Ambassador. Those things were not important to him. The other three issues were important. So I'm going to spend this time talking about those three issues. Thomas Jefferson is a great politician who hated politics. Those were not his interests. His great legacy is total faith in the common man. We love Jefferson because he believed we were all good and that we were all deserving of democracy. He wanted democratic rights for everyone. Some small federal government means, of course, more democratic rights. Ideologically, he's a Democrat, and he talked and acted for democracy. First thing, of course, his most outstanding accomplishment: he is the major writer of the Declaration of Independence, although clearly Ben Franklin and John Adams edited and changed it a little bit. But he is the great writer of the Declaration. Also for democracy, he was governor of Virginia for 3 years during the American Revolution, and while he was governor, he expanded the vote, he expanded education, he ended Anglican Church as the state church in Virginia. He ended primogeniture and entail. Those were the laws of inheritance where only the eldest son inherited. He created laws allowing more people to own more land and eliminated capital offenses down to 2, rape and murder, because before that there were dozens. Also, democracy, he's ambassador to France. He supported the French Revolution. He thought revolution was a great thing until everybody started getting killed in the Reign of Terror. And then he changed his mind a little bit. He said, "I did not in '89 believe they would have lasted so long, nor have cost so much blood." So he's often quoted as promoting revolution. People forget he changed his mind when he saw how much blood it would cost. As president, he's a very democratic president for 8 years. He never wore a sword or paraphernalia in ceremonies. He gave no public appearances, no ceremonies. He sold the gold coach that had been made for George Washington. He had a round dining table at the White House. Why round? There's no head of the table. Everybody's equal at Jefferson's table. Of course, everybody knew Thomas Jefferson was really the head of the table. He walks to his own inauguration. He didn't even use president when he signed documents. He just wrote Thomas Jefferson. He used his own clothes. He came to the front door to meet visitors, including very important visitors. He refused any gifts from anybody, even on his birthday. During the Revolution, he is governor of Virginia, and the British were invading. They had come into Virginia. He returns to his home to evacuate his wife and children. Somebody tips him off, the British are coming to get you, which would have been a real prize during the Revolution, to get the governor of Virginia as a prisoner. And he leaves right before the British. They are coming up the hill in one direction, and he is riding out in the other. When the British got there, a British officer called all of the slaves on the plantation together and said, "Okay, Who of you is going to tell me where Jefferson went? And they all knew he was going to his other plantation. Nobody said a word. He picked on one of the older male slaves, took a pistol out, held it up against the guy's head, and said, you tell me where Jefferson went. And the slave turned around to the British officer and said, shoot then. And he never found out where he went. So Jefferson escaped on that occasion. The second thing he worked for was freedom of religion. He is born and raised an Anglican. Very early as a teenager, he got disillusioned with the Anglican Church and became a deist. He was a deist all his life, wrote clearly he was a deist. This is Jefferson. I believe in one God and no more. I do not believe in the creed professed by any church, and I know my own mind is my own church. He is the one who promotes all the way through separation of church and state. Was he an atheist? No. There is a God, not sure about anything else. Today we would call him a Unitarian. He wrote, when he was retired after his presidency, very famously, he wrote his own Bible. What was his own Bible? He took the King James Bible, the regular English Bible, took a razor blade and cut out all kinds of stuff. He ended up with a very small little book, which he called not the Bible, but the Philosophy of Jesus. So what did he cut out with his razor blade? He cut out all the supernatural stuff, the loaves and the fishes, the water into wine, the resurrection, everything that was not proven by science, and ends up with the teachings of Jesus without any of the stories of his life, really. That was the important thing to him. He thought the religion of Christianity was a great thing, the practice of it, something else. He, in his own library, had copies of the Koran, he had copies of Buddhist literature, he had copies of all kinds of religious texts from around the world, and really was interested in integrating all these philosophies rather than picking out something that was done at the time. He knew more probably than anybody in America about other religions. He especially liked the Quakers and Judaism as well. So Thomas Jefferson, his great hope for mankind, once you have freedom of religion, is to go ahead and have every man have his own farm, his own land, and an educated public. Unlike Europe, in America, we have nothing but land, a lot of land. Everyone, he said, may have land to labor for himself. Education, first of all, he insisted on having public schools in the Northwest Ordinance, if you remember that. So he sets up a system of free public education across the country in America. When the Library of Congress, our early first national library, is burned in the War of 1812, he goes to Congress and offers to sell his huge library, which was one of the largest in America, very cheaply. And Congress took it. So if you want to see Thomas Jefferson's original books, they are still in the Library of Congress, along with millions of others today, of course. A lot of them were in foreign languages. Many of them people called at the time immoral books, things like the Koran, for example. His most famous contribution besides public education was the University of Virginia. He surveyed it. He's a trained surveyor. He designed it. He's a trained architect. He hired the faculty. He picked out the books in the library, and it's basically his baby. He did this in old age, and he did it because there was no really higher education in the South, particularly in Virginia. So on his back patio, he could set up a telescope and he could see the construction of the University of Virginia way down below in the valley, his home on Monticello, which means little mountain in Italian. And he watches the whole thing being built. He designed it and outlined it, including down to the doorknobs, the door hinges, and the types of windows in the buildings. So what did he do that was different? First of all, at the University of Virginia, this is Virginia, he forbid any of his students to bring their slaves to campus. There would be no slavery on campus. His university is built around a library. Most colleges at the time were church-sponsored and built around a chapel in the middle. There is no chapel at the University of Virginia. It was built around a library. What kind of things were taught there? The sciences. and philosophy, no religious instruction, no censorship, no required courses. He does all this when he's 80 years old and very ill. When the first graduating class shows up, there's 45 or 50 kids. He asks the professors, whom he hired himself, how are they doing? And the response was, and I'm quoting, they are wretchedly prepared. So Thomas Jefferson, he's old, he's ill, a couple years before his death, organizes a public education system for the state of Virginia. What he wanted to do was establish a free primary school system like in the Northwest Territories. Every county would have a free public school, and from each public school, the faculty would pick 20 students, the best 20, to go on to a free public high school or secondary school. From that high school, the faculty would pick 20 students to go on to free university college education. Why? Jefferson said, quote, from the rubbish, 20 geniuses will be culled. Thanks a lot for calling us all rubbish, but his goal was you pick the best from the best and you will end up with the leaders of tomorrow. So Jefferson is really responsible for the system of public education. We talk a lot about free public education and subsidize our colleges. We have grants and loans. We don't do it as well as most European countries who took Jefferson's idea very seriously. They have free college education as long as you qualify in Europe. It is free to anybody in the EU. And most people, I know students who have gone from America and paid almost nothing for free college education in Europe. Why? European countries know if you have an educated public, you're going to have better taxes that they can pay later on, and it's better for the country. What Jefferson did, his main goal was to expand the term democracy. If you talk about democracy, who should vote? In 1770, it was the aristocracy. It was the wealthy, the people with power. Jefferson says there's a different aristocracy. Now we're talking about an aristocracy of talent and education, not just wealth, because people can be very talented and educated and not have much money. That's why free education is important, because otherwise it becomes an aristocracy of money again. I'm ending with a quote from Jefferson. All eyes are open to the rights of man. The general spread of the light of science has already laid open the truth that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their back, nor a favored few booted and spurred, ready to ride them by the grace of God. We are all equal. Land and education will make us all equal. On the next video, I will be talking about Jefferson and slavery, which was the biggest problem in his life and the biggest problem in American history. So enjoy the rain and stay safe. Right now, it's absolutely pouring out.